I believe that it is an incredible blessing to be an artist. For me as an artist, the activism is my rent I pay for being an artist. I don't get to just live this life as a creative and be blissfully ignorant. I have to be painfully positive. The flag became a medium within my work by driving to my studio 4 or 5 times a week. After creating my first piece of the body of work, No Knock, that piece was inspired by a situation where a police officer followed me into the parking lot of my studio and questioned why I was there. Obviously, I'm at my studio and I'm at work, and nothing ill transpired from the interaction, but it led me to go and paint the piece, which is a police officer in a Klansman hood in a very cavalier pose. The idea of Under the Flag hadn't even been conceptualized until I had to live with the Klansmen in my studio. So I would be working on other pieces, and I'd look up and I had this police officer that I had painted sitting in the corner. In an attempt to tolerate that painting, I took a flag from a buddy of mine's garage and I draped it over the piece. And that was the aha moment that I realized that I had a body of work. And so I vividly remember sitting back in my studio and looking at that piece and visualizing a series of those pieces all with the flag draped over. I started to just think about what the interaction between the work and the flag and what the flag meant to me, and then what the flag meant to the people who were brandishing the flag on my way to work. I treat my inspirations like curated professors. So when I reflect back on when you could choose a professor and we were in college, that was one of the most challenging but rewarding things, because if you chose the right professor, that really dictated how you enjoyed school. So I choose my inspirations like curated professors, and some of the artists, many of them, I wasn't taught when I was in school. So a lot of the research comes from me going to museums or me digging and stumbling into work. And so, for instance, Michael Ray Charles. I'd seen Michael Ray Charles's work unknowingly, I'd say maybe 3 years prior. And I was very inspired by how outspoken he was as an artist and his aesthetic for painting. I saw Michael's work again in Spike Lee's Bamboozled. And he did the art direction for that movie, and I remember looking at all the works, and they were all same aesthetic. And I remember watching, and the second time I watched, I looked through the credits and I saw art direction, Michael Ray Charles. And I Googled him and my mind was blown. That really gave me the confidence to create this body of work from the vantage point of painting about blackface and seeing that if Michael can paint about this and use his voice in this manner, so can I. One of the other details I have to say about this work that I was inspired by was the visual of a person going under the flag. And I saw that from Benny Andrews' work, where he would draw or paint subjects under the flag. So that's really what was the driving force, the fuel, was Benny Andrews and studying his work and trying to figure out and conceptualize how do I create an interaction between the painting, the flag, and the person. So to be black is to be painfully positive. That's just, in order to be black in America, the essence of being black is to be painfully positive. It's a very unique balance that we have to deal with. The reason I partially titled these pieces Painfully Positive, because that's the approach that even when looking at history, American history as black people, we have to have. I have to be painfully positive. I love America, but it's still a painful love. It's a painful interaction. And so I can't sit back and act as though I'm treated the same as my white counterparts when I go into a store. I can't act as though I don't feel a wave of fear when I'm pulled over by the police. So the works Fear, Fascination, Envy, and Desire, the titles are inspired by a professor, I don't remember his name, saying they were the four cornerstones, the foundation of blackface. Why white people have an affinity with painting themselves black. And since 1912, 1914 with Birth of a Nation, to Thomas Dartmouth Rice and creating the Jim Crow character. And what the professor said, it's a mixture of envy, fear, fascination, and desire. And so that's what I chose to, when I was making these pieces, to focus in on the eyes. I remember Julian V.L said in his piece with the girl and her eyes are covered, he said, "Why'd you black out the eyes?" He said, "Because I want you to focus on the chin." So for me, it's like, there's no wording, there's no words on any of these pieces. I want you to focus on the expression. I want you to feel the titles, and I want you to feel the weight of the flag and get a glimpse of what it feels like when Black people do research on this country and how we have to internalize these pieces, these facts, and how it really affects us on the day-to-day. The piece behind me, the diptych, their titles are the dates that President Biden signed the Anti-Lynching Act. That was in 2022. And so I felt that was very impactful and relevant for the titles of the pieces, as lynching was just outlawed earlier this year. That piece, I was very much channeling David Hammons. I was making a nod and a reference to his body print pieces. There's a particular one that has a flag where he's a praying figure, but there's a flag that was cut out around the piece. And so I picked a bit more translucent material flag so that you could see the piece just enough underneath as a nod to David. With that piece, I did not want to create something that was very overt. Although it may seem overt now that you know what it is, it's actually quite covert because it's abstract before you realize what's going on. Somewhat like back in the day when people would go and take pictures in front of burning carcasses of Black people, or stand and parade at the community gathering of a lynching, which that was very much a situation. I wanted to reference that moment and create something that was painted in such a manner to reflect the scales of justice when the flags were lifted. This body of work is inspired by two books. The first book is Under the Black Flag. I removed the black and we got under the flag. None of these pieces, although some are in blackface, none of them are explicitly a Black individual. My love for Marty Robbins and Texas Rangers and just those things, just growing up listening to old Westerns and country music with my grandfather, it led me to get the book and then build around that title. How ironic, Under the Black Flag, but you're not talking about Black people. Nor is it a black flag, Marcus Garvey's black flag. Hilarious. And then the second book was The New Jim Crow. When I was reading that book, in my research and understanding of Jim Crow starting out as a minstrel character created by T.D. Rice. And this character, Jim Crow, made this man world famous, and it still haunts the very fiber of these American flags. And so for me, after watching, Bamboozled and really studying, I went through a huge rabbit hole of Michael Ray Charles's work. I really, truly love his work. I get this book, The New Jim Crow, and I'm like, oh, there's definitely gonna be something in here about the minstrel show. It's got to. Jim Crow started the minstrel. You can't have the new Jim Crow without talking about the original Jim Crow. 2 pages in the entire book. And so that's really what inspired me to tell this, because in lieu of what's going on in society right now within the education system, it's important that we continue to tell these stories as they relate to American history, especially if they're going to be omitting them from books and attempting to cover them up and not teach the real truth. So in my attempt to evade this bashing of critical race theory, I brought it to the gallery, because you can't say shit to me about being an artist. I could paint whatever I want to paint. And I've seen that by other great artists. There's no limitation, whereas there's limitation within the school. And so for me, it was important as an extension of my ancestors, as an extension of the artists that were before me, that I continue to paint and be painfully positive and paint from this vantage point.